Thank you so much for being on the programme. It's great to talk to you today. So you've just been appointed by the Chancellor onto his economics advisory panel. I'm interested to know, given the kind of economic landscape we're in, what would be your number one piece of advice to politicians now?
Hi, Sophie. I think you can't look much further than growth right now. We haven't got any, just at the moment. It's been anemic now for the better part of 15 years and counting. That makes all choices difficult.
It feels to me like growth has become almost a bit of a dirty word after the Liz Truss mini mega budget. How do you get growth in a responsible way?
Yeah, well, I think the key word there is responsible and sustainable and inclusive. So I think, what went wrong last year with the dash for growth is it wasn't seen as being a sustainable plan for growth.
So what would that look like then?
Well, I think ultimately this is about expanding how we produce as a country rather than what we consume as a country. It's about more people being in the workforce, and it's about those people producing more. That's the way we grow our capacity to produce as a country, what's sometimes called the supply side of the economy. Stimulating spending is dead easy. But ultimately, it's what we produce that determines long-run growth.
And is there any sort of kind of specific policies that you point to that could be helpful?
Yeah. So think of it in two bits. So roughly speaking, economics, dead simple. You can expand the economy either by growing the workforce or by making that workforce more productive. Okay. So on the first, what can we do to expand our workforce? Bearing in mind, Sophie, our workforce has contracted over the past couple of years by about 500,000 people. That's why we've got 1 million unfilled vacancies. That's why every sector and every region is screaming blue murder about an absence of staff. What could we do to expand the numbers of people available and in work? Well, immigration is one safety valve, ruled out by both parties, but is
rightly ruled out or wrongly?
I think given the scale and spread of skill shortages, for not operating a little bit to alleviate those through skilled, controlled migrant labour is a mistake.
Inflation is obviously a huge concern alongside growth, something that all of our viewers can be feeling.
Yeah.
What's your, we've seen the figures out, obviously, still above 10%. How difficult do you think the outlook is for inflation, or is it going to get better?
So it's been a very, very difficult 18 months. Let's be absolutely clear. We've got inflation still in double digits, and growth pretty much at zero. That's the wrong place on both fronts. That's the bad news, and it is bad news because we've seen the biggest squeeze on household budgets over the past 18 months, as we've seen since the 50s, actually. Very difficult position. The good news is I think from here, from around the second half of the year, things will begin to improve gradually, but they will begin to improve. Why do I say that? The world's getting a bit better. Not loads better, but a bit better. It's getting its mojo back, and that will help us sell more of our stuff overseas. The big cause of that squeeze on living standards has been high inflation, as you mentioned. That will begin to head south pretty soon, probably starting next month actually, and at a rate of knots. Because the biggest single reason why it's picked up to 10% plus is because of high energy prices, and they have now come off at a real rate of knots over the course of the past 6 months. And that will start to show up in headline rates of inflation starting pretty soon. And you fast forward 6 months, I think the headline inflation rate will not be double digits. It might be 3, 4 or 5.
So Rishi Sunak's target then to halve inflation, that looks pretty safe.
Pretty much nailed on.
A lot of what I'm hearing from the government is, look, we have to have pay restraint because that fuels inflation. So increasing pay, as obviously lots of people in the public sector want to see, is a bad thing for the economy. What do you make of that?
Well, there's a question of balance there. It's certainly true that one of the biggest single sources of inflation is how much workers are paid. That's just a matter of the cost arithmetic facing businesses, and a degree of moderation, whether in the setting of wages, but also in the setting of prices by businesses, is necessary right now, given that as a country we are somewhat poorer. Basically, the price of stuff that we buy from overseas has gone up a lot, energy and food. And that means as a country we are somewhat poorer. And the pain of that has been felt by workers through pay, and to an extent by businesses in the form of reduced profits and higher costs. Nonetheless, there is no question that the way we grow as a country is by having people's pay packets rising, not falling over time. And that, I hope and expect, we'll see second half of the year.
I'm interested to talk to you about interest rates and mortgages as well. Obviously, you used to work for the Bank of England. How concerned are you about what is happening when it comes to interest rates? How high do you think they might go?
Yeah, so we've seen them rise from almost nothing to now, 4.25%, which is a pretty chunky rise in a relatively short space of time, and a surprise to lots of people. The big question is what happens next? I mean, truth be told, even the rise so far, Sophie, has not been felt in most people's mortgage payments so far. Many are on fixed rates, and those fixed rates haven't reset yet. And I say all of that because the effects of the tightening seen so far haven't fully been felt. And that would personally, had it been back in my old job at the Bank of England setting interest rates, which was my previous life for 7 years, that would give me cause for pause. I think, hang on, the economy is still on unsteady legs right now. Much of the tightening that's already happened hasn't yet hit people's bank accounts. Perhaps now's the time to press the pause button and see what happens.
Because of people's pain in their mortgage rates, and because it's going to become difficult for them in this year.
Well, having faced a cost of living squeeze, if you're rising the cost of borrowing as well as the cost of living, that compounds the agony. And I'm not sure right now whether businesses or households are ready for the double whammy of those two things. So personally, I'd be thinking hard about pausing. Equally, I think it's likely the bank will feel the need to keep on rising further, and financial markets feel the same, because those price pressures and those wage pressures remain well above the bank's 2% target.
I want to talk to you about levelling up as well. You're chair of the Levelling Up Advisory Council. It's one of those phrases that is so common. We hear it all the time. We had a whole election campaign around it, and both sides of the House are using it. What do you think levelling up actually means? What is it about?
Yeah, well, for me, it's someone who grew up in a poor place in the north. It's about unlocking the potential.
Where'd you grow up?
In Yorkshire, just north of Leeds. I was born in Sunderland, a place that isn't doing well, hasn't been doing well for 70 years. So I know what levelling up feels like. And I know what success looks like. You know, in my prior life at the Bank of England, I spent most of my time walking around the country, seeing the economy firsthand. Places doing well, of which there are many right now, and places, Sophie, doing far less well. So it's definitely an achievable goal. It's also a desirable one. This is about unlocking the potential in people and in places, which is very, very considerable. What are the ingredients for success is probably your next question. Some we are seeing, I think, the solution doesn't lie in Whitehall hands. It doesn't lie in central government's hands. It must lie in local hands. This will only happen locally if it's led by local people. So the devolution agenda, the proliferation of mayors, I think is really, really important. And on that, both parties are now leaning heavily in to giving more power back to the people.
It's interesting talking about your own sort of journey from Sunderland to some of the wealthiest individuals and companies and areas of the United Kingdom. And for many people, they would say that to enable that journey to happen for more people, you need to look at education.
Yeah.
Do you think politicians are taking education as seriously as they should?
No, I don't. I think we are not having a conversation about education and learning, and we need to. We know that without that, we are pushing money and water uphill. So absolutely we need to build out the skill-based from the earliest of years through to a lifelong basis to create, we are chronically short of people and skills in this country. More than 10 million people in the workforce do not have the skills they need for the workplace. Half of all school kids leave school loathing learning rather than loving it. That is the worst endowment possible. The one thing you really want, above all else, for our education system to do is to embed a love of learning. Because if you love it, you'll keep on doing it.
What's your idea about maths to 18? Is that a good idea?
So we are an enumerate nation, and the Prime Minister is absolutely right about that. I'm the Vice Chair of National Numeracy. We'd expect me to say it's a real positive, and it is a real positive. But one, it's not about mathematics as currently taught. This is about basic number skills. Can I add up? Can I subtract? Can I make numbers for real and helping me live my life? Pay for my mortgage, pay for my grocery bill. But it's also about other things. It's not just about STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths. It's also about putting the A into STEM and making it STEAM, that is to say arts and humanities. What will protect us from the rise of the machine, from the rise of AI, is our creative capacity as human beings.
And yet that's often the first thing to be cut in budgets.
And has been. We've seen the dwindling budgets for arts and humanities, the dwindling number of people, young people, taking arts and humanities. And that's a mistake. That's a big mistake for the jobs and skills of tomorrow.